Hello and welcome to Decision NYC with Ben Max. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. The 2021 New York City election cycle is well underway and it's poised to be the most significant municipal election in decades. All of city government is on the ballot, and because so few incumbents are eligible to run for their current seats due to term limits, New Yorkers are electing many new office holders and the next roster of leadership for our city. There will be a new mayor of New York City elected here in 2021, as well as a new city controller, several new borough presidents, and many new city council members. And that's not all. A number of incumbents are eligible for and seeking re-election, including the city's public advocate. And there's a very crowded and competitive race for Manhattan District Attorney, and still more. Party primaries are set for June, and the general election will culminate on November 2nd. This is the first full set of municipal elections that will feature both early voting and the new ranked choice voting system. That's a system that only applies to party primaries and special elections, and we'll explain ranked choice voting in a separate show entirely. The city election cycle would be of enormous importance under even more usual circumstances, but it's obviously unfolding at a time of great crisis for our city, raising the stakes of the decisions that you, the voter, will make. This new wave of city leadership will quite clearly make or break the city's recovery from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic and its many negative impacts on families, health, jobs, housing, education, and much, much more. It's also important to note, of course, that New York City faced a number of crises even before COVID-19 hit, and some of those have only gotten worse. So it's a very important time of choosing here in New York City, and we're happy to bring you this new series of interviews with candidates running for citywide offices, mayor, public advocate, controller, as well as interviews with candidates for other offices like district attorney, and there will be debates. But these one-on-one conversations will help you to get to know the candidates better, learn about their backgrounds, their platforms, their vision, where they stand on key issues, and what they want to do if they're elected. The interviews, we hope, will help you sort through your many choices and make informed decisions when it is time to vote in the June primaries and fall general election. So let's get to today's interview. Joining me now by Zoom is Barbara Kavovit, a Democratic candidate for New York City Mayor. Barbara, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, Ben, for having me.
So tell folks a little bit about yourself before we get into why you're running for mayor or what you want to do as mayor. A little bit about your background, who you are, where you come from.
Sure. Well, I'm a Bronx-born girl, and I grew up in the Bronx till I was 14 years old, then moved to New Rochelle. My mom was a Bronx public school teacher in every public school system in the Bronx. My dad was a mechanical engineer. I went to the public school system in the Bronx, and then I went to SUNY Oswego, and I graduated with a BS in economics and finance. And I decided, after hearing my mom and her friends talk about the contractors that never showed up and the honey-do list of things that never got done in the home, I was going to start a home improvement business at the tender age of 22 years old. Not knowing anything about home improvement or construction, I had my work cut out for me, and I took some courses at BOCES in carpentry and estimating, and my parents, who are very conservative Democrats, really thought I should follow my path of what I went to college for in finance. But I believe that there was a void in the market for a woman in the construction industry. And this is over 25 years ago, if you can imagine. So I stood outside in the shopping center with my business cards, and I handed them out to women mostly who came out from grocery shopping, telling them that I could help them with their basic home improvements and home repairs. So women would call me, and I lived at home at the time, and women would call my parents' home phone number, and my mom would scream, and she would say, "Barbara, it's Mrs. So-and-so from this street, and she says you're going to be able to paint her room." Yes, Mom, that's for me. And I had that issue of having business now, but not knowing where to find the people to do it, nor did I understand how to do it. So I was very resourceful. I looked in the local papers, and I found carpenters and electricians and tile guys and plumbers. And for whatever job I had that I was being called on, I would call this subcontractor and bring them to the job. and I would present the homeowner with the proposal and supervise the work. And it was a very elementary way, and I didn't know at the time that I was going to be a contractor, but that's what it morphed into. So I became a general contractor. And in the early 90s, Governor Cuomo, the father of Governor Cuomo, not today's Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, yes, had started the set-aside program for minority and women-owned businesses. And I applied. And he actually invited me to his office in Albany, where I went, sat at his desk. He invited me to sit at his desk, and I became one of the first women certified by the state of New York as a woman business enterprise in 1994, I think it was, 94, 95. And from that point on, I had the certification, and I started building my business grassroots, pounding the pavement, looking in newspapers, calling companies that were moving, that were relocating, finding residential homes that were that needed renovation. And I built, over the course of the next 10 years, a $50 million construction company in New York City. It was quite successful. And then after 9/11, we had a very difficult time, and I ended up going out of business. And then I started another company, a line of tools for women, which a lot of women had seen. So I invented a line of tools, went to China, worked with the Chinese, a big Taiwanese public company, to create tools that were better fit for women's hands. So I did that. I sold them at Bloomingdale's and Home Depot and Walmart under the Barbara Kay name. And then I realized that I really missed construction, and I started going back into the construction industry. And that's when I started another business, Evergreen Construction, which I still have today. And Evergreen is a New York State, New York certified women business enterprise. And we are a multi-million-dollar company based on just a lot of hard work. We're a small business in New York City, located on 45th Street. I've been in the city for 30 years, pounding the pavement. I've taken some detours. I've written 3 books, 2 nonfiction and 1 novel. I've also been on the Housewives of New York. So I've done a lot of things. And I believe that this city has given me more opportunity than anywhere I could have ever imagined. And I really want that opportunity for everyone else, no matter where you're from.
So that sounds like we're getting into the motivation to jump into the race for mayor. So say a little bit more about that. Talk about your thinking. Was this something that had been in your mind previously? Did it just occur to you one day? How did you think about jumping into politics when obviously you'd had some political exposure? We all do. We all come into, as you said, with your business, working with government. We all interact with government at different points, but not being so much a political figure. How are you thinking about that? When did it occur to you? What was the decision-making process like?
I think it became more of a question of, why shouldn't I run? I was looking at the city, and it was polarizing to me of what was and what became. And it wasn't only because of COVID. I believe that all of this was happening prior to COVID. And we've been in, a financial crisis way before COVID. And COVID pushed me over the edge. It certainly did. So, and the way that the government handled COVID, not only from a federal level, but a city level. I felt like the city was not taking care of its people. And so it became, why shouldn't I run? And if the politicians were doing such a great job, then why are we in this mess? And I felt that it would take a business person that really was a New Yorker, that's been here for 30 years, that was a grassroots person that came from really a very humble beginning, and just was brought up on, if you want something, you have to fight for it. My dad, when I was 9 years old, put a hammer in my hand, and I say he put love in my heart. He gave me the ability to learn how to build and learn how to fight. I came from a tough area in the Bronx. The school systems were tough, and I had to learn how to persevere. I had to learn how to break through the barriers, being a woman, being a Jewish woman. There are barriers for everyone, but I also believe that there are opportunities for everyone. And you have to work hard to do it. And that's what I'm trying to instill in people. There are opportunities out there, but New York City is lacking those opportunities. Like even in the WMBE program, I want to see African American women and Latino women move up the economic ladder. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars a year that are set aside for women and minority-owned businesses, but it's impossible to get that because the bureaucratic mess of going through it, which I've tried to do, is virtually impossible. They make it impossible. So I would like to streamline that.
Say more about what skills and characteristics you think you bring to the role, to the race, that sets you apart. You talked a little bit about your experience. Are there ways that you lead? Are there ways that you manage that you think are, big strengths of yours that you want to let New Yorkers know? Because if you are elected mayor, you're running a city government with 300,000 plus employees, a 90 plus $billion budget. Talk about your sort of management and leadership skills and what you think sets you apart there.
Listen, you're not going to be good at everything. Okay. I know what I'm good at. I'm a leader. I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I'm good at. New York is a plethora for the smartest people in the world. We have great institutions. We have John Jay College, which is the best criminal justice college. We have a plethora of corporations. I would attach myself to the smartest people in New York City and create cabinets because, you can't be good at everything. And the way I manage is by teams. You have to have teams. You have to create deputy mayors in different areas, create cabinets, because you can't be in all places. But if I were mayor, I would be out there in the street. When I'm in construction, being in construction, I should say, not when being in construction, the reason I'm successful at what I do is because I don't sit behind a desk every day. I get out in the field. I see my jobs. I talk to my employees. I talk to my field supers. I talk to my project managers. I talk to the electricians and the plumbers and the clients. I'm a people person. And the only way to be successful is to create relationships and teams with those people and to get out in the streets of New York, talk to people, see what their issues are, how to provide solutions to their problems. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years on a corporate level. But when I'm hired to do projects for large corporations, I don't sit behind a desk and do it. I get out there. It's time, it's schedules, it's coordination, it's budgets, it's all of those things wrapped up to one. And that's really why the city today is not the city that I would be mayor of. If I was mayor of New York City, it would be a very different place.
Let's come back to that in just 1 second and hear what that would be like. But before we jump to that, you don't think government experience, is a prerequisite, is important before becoming mayor of New York City? You don't think government experience at a different level of government is, essential or extremely helpful?
I think it is essential, but it's not necessarily essential for me. I think that I would have people in my cabinet, in my office that did have a government experience. But I think me being a New Yorker and a citizen of New York and a business owner in New York gives me the experience to be able to lead New York into a better place. Because again, if the politicians did such a great job, why are we in this mess, this chaos? I see chaos.
Let's talk about what New York would look like with you in charge. What's the vision? Let's start this way. If you had somebody for 1 minute here to say, if I was mayor, here are the big changes, the big ideas that I would start with, what's the answer there? And then take it from there.
Public safety, the economy, transportation, and education.
Okay.
Those are my 4 main things that I would tackle in my first 100. Oh, sorry, homelessness. Sorry. Mm-hmm. The 5 things that I would tackle in my first 120 days.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about each. We have a nice amount of time together, but not enough to go through every issue. So how do you address public safety? What are the keys to that? Let's try to hit each of these at least with a couple of thoughts.
Well, I think number 1, public safety is the most important. It's like the foundation of any job that I would build. Okay, you don't build a project without a solid foundation, and the solid foundation in New York City is public safety. Walking, subways, buses. That's how people get around. And if you don't feel safe walking on the subway or on the buses, then it prevents the economy from moving forward. So how would I tackle that? Number one, okay, first of all, it has to come down to the police. People right now feel over-policed and underprotected. So, and this, it's all like a flow chart. It has to all go together. So if people feel over-policed and underprotected, you have to go into those communities and really, there's a number of things I would do. And there's so many things I would say right now. So, and I'm going to fly off a lot of different tangents.
Go ahead.
But all in all, the police, I feel, have done a brilliant job at one thing: protecting New York against terrorism since 9/11. They've done not a good job, a brilliant job, okay? Since 9/11, we've had no terrorist attacks. Well, there's been a couple instances, but so I think they've done a brilliant job working with the FBI. The police need to get out of the homeless business. They're not psychiatrists, okay? We need to tap into our social services to make sure that our social services are doing the correct job, okay, to handle the homeless issue. It breaks my heart to see people without food, without shelter, without family. We need to do light years ahead. This is the best city in the world, and we're so behind with the homeless issue.
Just on crime itself, and you know, the big spike in 2020 was, of course, around gun violence. What do you think needs to happen from a public safety and policing standpoint from a mayoral administration to reduce gun violence? Do you think, as some have said, you know, this was a nationwide trend in big cities? Do you think some have said, you know, this was really about the disruption of COVID, people being out of school, out of work, and really, you know, when jobs and schools are coming back, we'll probably see a return to a lot less gun violence? Or do you have another thought on that?
Well, I think crime and gun violence are cyclical. They go up, they go down. Same thing with jails. You know, there's a greater population in jails over a period of time, and then it goes down. So it's cyclical. I do think that COVID have pushed people over the edge. If you didn't have a job, if you didn't have a place to live, if you didn't have food to put on the table, of course. And I think the mental illness aspect of it has really, you know, thrown people into crisis. So I do think that. And getting back to your question about gun violence, number one, when it comes to the police, I don't believe that the police should have, you know, there's a surplus in the federal government, in military, that the surplus goes to the police departments. I don't think that the police should be privy to the surplus of hard military tools. So I don't think we need that. So I think that I would like to do away with. And as far as gun violence, yes, I would like to put things into place to prevent guns from being not only in New York, but New Jersey, because, you know, we're so close. We have to think about New Jersey. We have to think about Connecticut. We have to think about the states that are close to us and how to prevent guns from being sold. So that is one of the things, too, that I would definitely work on in my first 120 days as well.
Okay. You mentioned the economy. You talked about making sure there's more contracting for women and minority-owned businesses. But broadly speaking, on the city's economic revival, what do you think are the keys to making sure that the city's economy comes roaring back, that people, hundreds of thousands of people who lost jobs get jobs again, that there's growth, that we bring tourism back, whatever it might be that you'd focus on? What would that look like?
You know, that goes back, Ben, to public safety. You know, so it all, like I was saying earlier, is intertwined. We need people to stay, and we need people to come back. We need people to start small businesses. How do people start small businesses? Okay, first of all, you gotta make the transportation system solid. You have to make people feel like they're not going to get hit on the head when they're walking. They're not going to get thrown into the tracks when they're on the subway. You know, I'm going to say it. I am going to be real. Common sense policy is what I'm talking about here. Make people feel safe. Okay. And then people will start businesses. How did I start a business? I started a business with $60. Now, I'm not saying that you can do that today. Maybe it'll be a little more, but I started a business with $60 going out in the street. Okay. And selling my services to people that were interested in home improvement. Immigrants, people that came here that started all these businesses. That's what we need. We need people to start small businesses. We're missing the middle class. We're missing the part of New York City that will provide people in lower income areas to feel that they have opportunities as New Yorkers. I felt that I had an opportunity as a New Yorker. There was nothing that was standing in my way of believing that I can start a construction company and breaking through a glass ceiling where there were no women.
Are there policy changes from the mayoral administration that you think are key there? Is it doing away with too much red tape that exists now? Is it tax breaks? Are there things you do to, develop more partnerships with larger businesses to help, incubate smaller businesses? What are some of your thoughts on sort of mayoral administration policies that would help that?
Sure. The first thing I would do is go to the state and I would try and lower the insurance, because insurance really makes it prohibitive to a lot of businesses to be in business. I mean, my insurance costs are exorbitant. Why is that? So that's the first thing that really makes it prohibitive for people to be in business. Insurance costs are through the roof. So that's one of the first things I would do on a state level. I would definitely streamline the W and MBE program, try and make it so that it's not so bureaucratic, make it so that it's easier for people to get approved and easier for people to get contracts. That's the name of the game. Getting contracts, tapping into the hundreds of millions of dollars a year that the city has because they renovate, build so many different things. Why not give it to minority and women-owned businesses? They're trying, but it's not working. It's not working the way it should. So those are a couple of things I would do right away.
Okay, let's talk about education. What needs to change in the city? Are you a believer in mayoral control of city schools? Would you pursue continuing that as mayor, or do you think it's time to go back or adjust to a different system? There used to be the old Board of Education model that was more localized. I'm sure you're familiar, at least in broad strokes, with that from growing up in the city. But what do you think the future of governance of the city school system should look like? And what do you think are keys to ensuring that more students in the city get a good education, are ready for college and careers? We have such big gaps on those fronts, and such a, as the current mayor like to say, tale of two cities on that front. What do you think about governance of the city schools and what you would try to do as mayor?
I'm glad you asked that question, Ben. First of all, I think the current mayor, Mayor de Blasio, did a good job with pre-K, making pre-K available to everyone, but we can't stop there. Prior to the 1975 fiscal crisis, we had a free education system in New York City, CUNY. That is something that I would also do in the first 120 days. We must, without doubt, go from the junior high school right to community college, or the senior level college, or a BOCES type program, free. Okay, it is imperative that we create a free city-run system for lower income and middle income areas, so that people can go right from high school to college, whether it be community college, whether it be a senior college, whether it be something to learn carpentry, vocational. Sorry, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. A vocational program, mechanical, carpentry. All of that is so important, and it's what we're lacking. And I believe if we had that today, a free system, that would create, and also not only that, but we would have to create the jobs. Okay, that would help create the jobs to do that. We need to tap into corporations, corporate America in New York City. We have some of the largest corporations in America right here in New York City. We need to tap into that, have them help us do that. But I want a free education system for everyone that needs it.
You have something on your campaign website about raising standards for teachers and administrators. Can you explain that a little bit? And what you think the problem is now, and what you think it would solve or help improve by raising some of the standards for teacher certification, recertification, and the experience required to be an administrator?
I mean, I think we have a couple of issues here with this. My mom, like I said, was a public school teacher for 30 years and in the Bronx and an assistant principal. So she, I heard it every day when she came home, some of the issues then and some of the issues now. Some of the issues I think that we face are a disparity in learning, okay? Some people, including myself, are not great learners. When I was in high school, when I was in junior high school, I had dyslexia. I had problems learning. So we need more educators that are qualified to teach students, because not all students are alike, okay? We can't all be A students, and we are not going to all be able to wire rocket ships. That's not how we're wired. But I believe that each person, if given the time by teachers who are qualified in the areas that they should be to help students, I would say to help students not only manage, but incubate their assets. That's what we need. Teachers that really take a much stronger role, and we should give them incentives for doing that to help students to identify the kind of, I don't want to say the brain, but identify what the strengths are of each student and how best to nurture them to go from junior high school to high school to college.
We're unfortunately just in our last couple of minutes. So I want to get you with a couple more quick questions.
We are? Oh my God.
Yeah. Time flies fast, right? So this is really more of just a couple quick yes or no's, and then I'll have a final question for you or two. So the first is, the city has a plan to close the Rikers Island jail complex and build 4 new borough-based jails. Do you think that plan should continue as is, be totally stopped, and keep the Rikers Island jail complex open, or something else?
What I think is that they should not close Rikers Island. I'm a big believer in refurbishing.
There's some people who propose building new housing on Nycha land that's not currently, being used for housing. It might be parking lots, it might be other open space. Do you believe in building new housing on Nycha land?
Yes, as long as it's not privatized.
Okay, interesting. All right, last 2 quick things. One, Mayor Bill de Blasio, for his tenure overall, you gave him a little credit for pre-K, but other things seem critical. What letter grade would you give him for his tenure overall?
D.
D, okay. And lastly,
Minus.
D minus, okay. And lastly, and feel free to explain this one as we come to the end of our time. Do you have a role model in politics, someone who's been in politics, past or present, who you would point to, not necessarily someone you agree with on everything, but someone you would call a role model who has similar politics to you, but has been in the political arena? And go ahead and name somebody and explain a little bit of why.
I think Michelle Obama. She's someone that I've watched over the years, and how she really has matured over the years. And I looked up to her because I felt that she really took a stand, and she was a leader. She was a leader, and she had really a lot of common sense policies. And she was someone that I really looked up to, and she seemed that she was universal. She from my standpoint, she wanted good for everyone. And that's really who I am. And if I was mayor, I really want opportunity for all. I really do.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there. Barbara Kavovit is a Democratic candidate for New York City mayor. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Ben.
And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max. Key decisions for New York City voters are coming up in June and the fall. There's a lot on the line for all of us in the future of New York City. I hope this conversation and others are helpful to you as you sort through your choices to make decisions when the time to vote comes. I'm Ben Max. See you next time.